2 a.m., Cambridge freezing cold. On the steps of the Science Center, a paperboy in his father's old torn coat bends over a school notebook and first sees the wave function as water. Cambridge before winter felt like a glass cage filled with mist. Streetlights cast yellow threads across salted sidewalks, and the wind from the Charles River rattled branches like an old violin. Eli walked quickly, one hand gripping a bag of newspapers, the other holding shut his coat. The coat was too big, the shoulders worn, the collar torn like a crack in ice. It was the last thing his father left. The faint smell of pine and plaster still clung to it. Each time Eli pulled the zipper, he thought he could hear his father's cough, the sound of boots on scaffolding. By day, Eli rode an old bicycle through Somerville and Cambridge, tossing newspapers onto porches. By night, he walked from the damp boarding house to Harvard. Among the red brick buildings, he found a silence different from home. The whisper of students turning pages, fireplaces still warm, and sometimes the steps of a passing guard. His favorite place was the steps of the Science Center, wide stone slabs facing the yard. There he opened his notebook, balanced a worn pencil, and tried to wrestle with mysteries far bigger than himself. Eli was 13, small, with dark, quiet eyes. Back in the dry Imperial Valley of California, he had followed his mother in the fields, listening to brittle grass break under the sun. His father had gone to Boston to work construction, sending money home. Then the accident came. Scaffolding collapsed when the wind shifted. Since then, the coat had been Eli's shelter. His mother moved east for kidney treatment, dialysis appointments now marked in black on their calendar. Each morning, Eli left her a note. "I am delivering papers. I will be home by 6. The porridge is ready." She kept those notes in her pocket like charms. That night, after finishing his route, Eli returned to the Science Center steps. He set down his bag, opened his notebook, and wrote the letters T for time, X for position, Psi for the strange wave scientists said described particles. In a book from the library, he had seen the equation that ruled it. To most people, the symbols were walls. To Eli, windows. He remembered a pond near his home in California, where rare rains left small pools. Each time he threw a pebble, rings spread outward, struck the bank, overlapped, disappeared, then returned. If psi is water, he thought, maybe I can see it without imagining. He had read about a way of splitting psi into 2 parts, one showing how strong the wave was, the other showing its rhythm, its phase. He sighed. "Quantum," he whispered, "a mountain both beautiful and cold." "Cold, isn't it?" A man's voice startled him. Eli clutched his coat. A tall, older man in glasses and a dark scarf stood in the lamplight, staring as if a star had fallen at his feet. "I'll leave," Eli whispered. "I was only sitting here. I'm not chasing you away." The man leaned closer, glancing at the notebook. "You are writing the Schrödinger equation. Where did you learn this?" "At the library. And from the glass boards people forget to clean." Eli pointed toward a hall window where faint chalk still clung, integrals, arrows, the word Hilbert half erased. The man sat down beside him. "My name is Reinhardt. I teach here. What are you doing with psi?" Eli hesitated, then spoke softly. "If psi is water, then one part could be its color, another its height. As time passes, I would see waves spread, overlap, change with walls. I want to make that lake here." He pointed at the stone steps where lamplight pooled. Reinhardt studied him. "Most students see this equation as a wall. You see it as water." Eli hugged his coat. "My father said every wave has a soul if you listen long enough. He died last year. This coat was his. It keeps me warm." The professor looked at the worn seams, the yellowed buttons, and for a moment saw his own father long ago, dropping dry leaves into a German river. How would you show this lake? Eli flipped a page. If we imagine a line of points, each with two values, strength and rhythm, we could draw one as height, the other as color. When time moves, we update both. On a screen, people could see interference, waves adding, canceling, making new patterns. Then even my mother could understand probability. She would know why we say not the particle is here, but the chance is here. Reinhardt nodded slowly. He had spent decades teaching with proofs and strict symbols. But on those cold steps, a boy had led him back to the pond of his childhood. How old are you? 13? Almost 14. And you deliver papers? Yes, 4:30 to 7. Then I cook porridge for my mother. She has dialysis 3 times a week. The professor turned his face away so Eli would not see his eyes. Upstairs, on the 3rd floor, is an old water tank used for wave experiments. It still works. Tomorrow, no. This afternoon, after you rest and care for your mother, you may come. I will get permission. Try to make your lake real. Eli's eyes widened. His chest felt hammered with warmth. May I? It will be hard, Reinhardt said, but worth it, and you will not do it alone. They sat in silence as the wind rustled the trees. Eli packed his notebook, touched his coat as if touching his father's shoulder, and thought, he wouldn't like me outside this late. But he would like me to see water. Reinhardt rose and offered his hand. The boy's hand was cold stone. The old man's warm and dry. Eli, Reinhardt said, don't lose the coat. Because it keeps me warm? Because it keeps me warm too, Reinhardt answered with a rare smile. It reminds me that every equation begins with a story. When he left, Eli stayed. The clock on Memorial Hall struck twice. Eli wrote at the bottom of his page, Goal, create a light lake to show energy levels. He sketched simple waves inside a box. No teacher would grade it, but writing was enough. A gust of wind swept the steps. Eli zipped the coat, breathing in the faint smell of pine. He remembered his father bending down, pulling the coat over his small shoulders, saying, you don't need to grow fast. Just don't be cold. That night in Cambridge, those words sounded clearer than any clock. On the way home, Eli passed a glass board lit by a single lamp. Chalk letters still read, Heisenberg, Uncertainty Principle. He touched the glass, whispering, uncertainty is not chaos. It is respect. Back at the boarding house, his mother slept pale and still. Eli stirred porridge, then sat with his notebook. He wrote, explain to mother, one part of psi is thickness of possibility, the other is the wind direction of a wave. He smiled, certain she would understand. She once measured the wind by watching a strand of hair fall. He folded the notebook and closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw a lake. On one side, a wall. On the other, a lamp. Waves ran, overlapped. On one bank, an old man sat. On the other, a father bent down, putting a coat on his son. Their waves crossed, weaving the water together. Morning came. Snow fell like salt. Eli left a note on the table. Mother, I am delivering papers. I will be home before 6. This afternoon I will borrow a lake at school. I will tell you about the singing lake. He tucked the note into her sweater. Her hand closed around it as if holding a warm stone. On his bicycle, Eli felt warm not only from the coat but from a door opening ahead. He thought of the tank on the 3rd floor, of colors turning with rhythm, of children one day asking, do waves speak? And he imagined answering, yes, but first, listen. The afternoon after that cold night, Cambridge wore a thin blanket of snow. Students crossed Harvard Yard with their scarves flying like banners. Eli parked his bicycle at a lamppost, the wheels still dusted white. In his pocket, he carried the folded note his mother had smiled at that morning. "A lake that sings," she had whispered, weak but amused. That smile lit him more than any lamp. Professor Reinhardt waited at the entrance of the Science Center. He wore the same dark scarf as the night before. "Follow me, Eli. We don't have much time." They climbed to the third floor. The corridor smelled of old varnish and chalk dust. At the end was a door with a frosted window. Inside, the lab looked like a forgotten workshop. Benches bore the scars of decades. Wires curled like snakes in drawers. In the corner stood a rectangular glass tank, its edges fogged, beside an old projector buried under dust. "This," Reinhardt said, "is where your lake begins." Eli set down his notebook as carefully as if it were a family photograph. He leaned over the tank. The water surface lay still, reflecting the ceiling light. His reflection stared back, a boy with quiet eyes, wrapped in a coat too large, standing between fear and wonder. Reinhardt flipped a switch. The projector hummed awake, its beam cutting through the dust. He lowered a metal plate into the water. Droplets slid down the glass. "Tap the surface," he said. "Each tap makes ripples, like the pebbles you described." Eli's heart thudded. "And if we use 2 taps? Then you'll see interference, waves crossing, creating patterns neither alone could make." "That is the heart of quantum behavior." The professor tapped once. Rings spread, struck the edges, and returned. Eli's eyes widened. They were like the sketches in his notebook, but alive. "They breathe," he whispered. "Now 2 taps," Reinhardt said. He touched both plates. 2 families of waves met, crossed, and formed a pattern of bright and dark bands on the lab wall. Eli gasped. "It's the equation, but alive. It's the Lake of Psi." "The Lake of Psi," Reinhardt repeated. "Yes, because people can see what was invisible, not just numbers, but a lake that sings with light and rhythm." They worked for hours. Reinhardt showed him how to angle the projector so shadows sharpened. He explained how a camera could record the ripples and how a program could play them back in slow motion. Eli listened with fierce attention, as though each instruction might save his mother. When Reinhardt left briefly to fetch cables, Eli bent close to the tank. The ripples still trembled. He whispered as if to a living creature, "I'll show them you exist. Mother will see your rhythm. Father will know his coat carried me here." His breath fogged the glass. Reinhardt returned, heavy manual under one arm. He paused at the sight of the boy leaning over the tank, whispering. His voice softened. "Be careful, Eli. Curiosity can be fire. It warms, but it also burns." Eli straightened, hugging his notebook. "Then I'll hold it carefully, like this coat." The professor nodded, then connected the wires. Together they projected the ripples onto a screen. For the first time, waves stretched larger than the tank, painted in light. Eli laughed softly. It was a sound Reinhardt had not expected. Unguarded, bright. Something long asleep stirred in him. Evening shadows crept through the frosted window. Reinhardt finally shut down the projector. "Enough for today. Go home, Eli. Your mother is waiting." Eli packed his notebook, zipped his coat, and bowed his head slightly. "Thank you, Professor." As he left, he noticed a tall man leaning against the doorframe. He was young, sharp-faced, with restless eyes. He wore no coat, though the hall was cold. His gaze flicked to Eli, then to Reinhardt with a smirk. "Who's the boy?" he asked casually. "A student of mine," Reinhardt said curtly. The man chuckled. "Doesn't look like Harvard material, but perhaps he'll surprise us." His eyes lingered on the notebook under Eli's arm before he walked away. Eli frowned. "Who was that?" "Victor Hale," Reinhardt replied. "A postdoctoral researcher. Brilliant, but—" he hesitated. "Keep your ideas close. Not everyone guards them with honesty." Eli nodded, clutching his coat tighter. He understood enough to feel the warning. That night, back in the boarding house, Eli told his mother about the lake. She listened, eyes tired but smiling faintly.
"I can almost see it," she whispered. "A lake where waves sing, and where your father might walk by and listen."
Eli sat beside her until she slept. Then he opened his notebook and wrote at the bottom of a page, "The Lake of Sigh, born today." Outside, snow fell thicker, laying a hush over Cambridge. In some office, Victor Hale thought about the boy in the torn coat. In another, Reinhardt stared from his window, wondering whether meeting Eli was a gift or a test. Winter deepened in Cambridge. Snow piled against the steps of the Science Center, and the Charles River froze in thin, glassy sheets. Eli rose each dawn to deliver newspapers, then hurried back to the lab in the afternoon. In the third-floor room, the water tank became his world. He learned how to angle the projector, measure ripples with the camera, and compare the recorded waves to the sketches in his notebook. To Eli, the tank was not just glass and water, it was a mirror where the invisible finally took shape. Reinhardt watched quietly. He gave few words of praise but never failed to return. For the professor, each evening beside Eli stirred memories of when he, too, had believed physics could be poetry. But not everyone who noticed Eli saw him with the same eyes. Victor Hale appeared often now, leaning against the doorframe, his coatless figure sharp in the cold halls. He would glance at the screen where Eli's colored ripples danced, then ask casual questions that always carried an edge. Why paint the phase as color? Why not just publish equations? Or, interesting pattern, did you think of this yourself? His tone balanced between curiosity and condescension. Eli, unsure, always answered honestly. Yes, sir. I thought of the color wheel because my mother could see it better that way. Victor smirked. Charming, but physics is not children's art. Reinhardt, standing nearby, would tighten his jaw. Enough, Victor. Leave the boy to his work. One evening, Reinhardt told Eli in private, Be careful. Hale is brilliant but hungry. He believes success is a race with only one winner. He may try to claim what you've built. Eli looked down at his coat. But it's not mine alone. It's water, waves, something anyone can see. That humility, Reinhardt said softly, is both your shield and your danger. Weeks passed. Snow turned to ice, and the Lake of Sigh grew more vivid. Eli managed to simulate standing waves in the tank, close to what textbooks called discrete energy levels. He colored the nodes in shifting shades, and when the projector cast them onto the wall, the patterns looked like a stained glass window breathing. Reinhardt arranged for Eli to present at an informal seminar, a small gathering of graduate students and postdocs. It will not be formal, he promised, but it will let others see your vision. Eli nodded nervously. He had never spoken in front of more than his mother, but he wanted her to know the lake could sing beyond their room. The day of the seminar, Eli wore his father's coat, cleaned as best he could. He carried his notebook under one arm. Reinhardt walked with him into the seminar room, where a dozen students waited with coffee cups and skeptical eyes. Victor sat near the front, his smile thin. Reinhardt introduced briefly, This is Eli Serrano. He has something to show us about waves. Then he stepped aside. Eli placed his notebook on the table, his hands trembling. I deliver newspapers in the mornings, he began, voice small. A ripple of laughter passed through the room, but Reinhardt's stare silenced it. Eli continued, stronger now. At night I come here. I thought, if equations are like walls, maybe we can open a window. If we color the rhythm of the wave and raise its strength as height, we can see the invisible. He switched on the projector. The tank lit up. Ripples spread, colored by the wheel he had coded with Reinhardt's help. On the wall, bands of red and blue pulsed, crossing into violet and green. The room fell silent. Here, Eli said softly. Two waves meet. Where they agree, the light is bright. Where they cancel, darkness stays. This is interference, not mystery, but music. He paused. Even my mother, who never studied, could see it. She said it looked like stained glass that breathes. For a moment, no one spoke. Then a graduate student murmured, "Beautiful." Another whispered, "Clearer than any diagram I've seen." But Victor leaned forward, tapping his pen. "Curious. Did you design this color scheme alone?" "Yes," Eli said, steady now. "I thought of it when I remembered throwing stones into a pond. My father used to say every wave has a soul." Victor smiled, but his eyes were cold. "In science, Eli, souls don't matter. Equations do. Remember that." The seminar ended with polite applause. Eli packed his notebook, heart still pounding, but he felt warmth. For once, others had seen the lake. Later that evening, as Reinhardt locked the lab, Victor lingered. "You shouldn't waste time on sentiment," he told the professor. "That boy is clever, yes, but naive. Someone will take his idea and polish it properly." Reinhardt's voice was sharp. "Not while I stand here." Victor's smile widened. "Then we'll see how long you stand." That night, Eli returned to the boarding house and told his mother about the seminar. She was weak from treatment, but her eyes glistened. "They saw it, Eli. Your father would be proud." He sat beside her bed until she slept, then opened his notebook. At the bottom of the page, he wrote, "Even if they doubt, the lake still sings." Outside, ice cracked on the Charles. In an office across campus, Victor Hale typed quickly, drafting a paper. He wrote of a novel visualization of quantum states through phase color mapping. No mention of a boy in a torn coat, only his own name on the title page. January winds tore through Cambridge with a sharpness that cut to the bone. Snow had turned to gray slush on the sidewalks, and the Charles lay under slabs of ice that cracked and groaned like tired wood. For Eli, mornings began as always, with newspapers, numb fingers, and the long ride through streets where dogs barked and porches glistened with frost. But each evening now carried a double pull: the lab where the lake of Psy grew brighter, and the hospital where his mother lay tethered to machines. Reinhardt had arranged visiting hours so Eli could slip in after deliveries. Rosa Serrano's face grew thinner by the day, her voice softer, but her eyes never left her son when he described the tank. "It shines like stained glass, Mama," he whispered one evening. "The waves breathe. You would see how probability is not numbers but music." She touched his hand, skin cool and frail. "Then promise me you'll let it sing for others, not just for me." Eli nodded, though his throat ached. At the same time, shadows gathered in the academic world. Victor Hale had quietly polished his draft, weaving Eli's ideas into technical language. He spoke of phase color mappings and standing wave visualization, never mentioning the boy who had first painted Psy with water and light. Reinhardt suspected, but proof was thin. One evening, after a lab session, Reinhardt called Eli aside. "I must warn you," he said. "Hale is preparing a paper. I fear he will pass your vision as his own." Eli looked down at his father's coat. "But I have no name here. No one would believe a boy who delivers papers." "They will," Reinhardt said, voice firm. "Because truth has weight, even when spoken softly." The following week, Reinhardt invited Eli to sit in on a graduate seminar. The room was lined with chalkboards, equations layered upon equations. Students filled seats, notebooks open. Victor stood at the front, poised, his voice smooth as he began. "Today, I will show a new method of visualizing quantum states." Eli froze. On the screen appeared patterns he knew too well. Colored bands, breathing nodes, the same stained glass waves he had shown weeks before. Gasps of admiration filled the room. "Remarkable," someone whispered. "Clearer than the textbooks." Victor's smile deepened. "Yes, with this method we can see probability in living color. Imagine teaching undergraduates with such clarity." He spoke as though the lake of Psi had sprung fully formed from his mind. Eli's fists clenched. The notebook in his lap felt heavy. He glanced at Reinhardt, whose jaw tightened but whose eyes urged patience. When the seminar ended, students crowded around Victor Beyondaz, offering praise. Eli slipped out quietly, his chest burning. On the steps outside, he pulled his coat tighter. Snow swirled like ashes around him. He wanted to shout, but his father's words echoed instead. "You don't need to grow fast. Just don't be cold." That night, he biked straight to the hospital. His mother's eyes opened weakly as he entered. "You're late," she murmured. "I was at the seminar," he said softly. "Someone else showed the lake, as if it were his." Her breath came shallow. "Does the lake still sing?" "Yes," Eli whispered. "Then let it sing through you." "Not through anger. Promise me." He promised, though it felt like swallowing fire. Meanwhile, Reinhardt confronted Victor. "You crossed a line," he said, voice low but hard. Victor shrugged. "Ideas are free, Professor. If you didn't write them down first, they belong to no one." "They belong to truth," Reinhardt snapped. "And you know where you first saw them." Victor's smile thinned. "Then prove it." He walked away, footsteps echoing. The next days blurred for Eli. Between dawn deliveries, hospital visits, and stolen hours in the lab, he carried two worlds on his shoulders. In the lab, he refined the Psi Lake, adding colors that shifted with rhythm. In the hospital, he read to his mother from physics books, translating equations into stories she could picture. "The particle doesn't stand still, Mama," he explained. "It hums, like a note inside a violin." Her lips curved in a faint smile. "Then play it for me." But one evening, as he left her bedside, a nurse stopped him gently. "Your mother's condition is worsening. You must prepare." Eli walked back into the night, snow crunching under his thin shoes, his coat flapping like a flag. He wanted to collapse on the Science Center steps, but instead he opened his notebook and wrote, "Even if they steal, even if she fades, the waves still breathe." Reinhardt found him there hours later, asleep against the stone, notebook clutched to his chest. The old professor draped his own scarf over the boy and whispered into the cold air, "Hold fast, Eli. The truth will need your voice." February wrapped Cambridge in steel-gray skies and relentless winds. For Eli, the days narrowed into two places: the hospital, where the machines clicked beside his mother's bed, and the Science Center, where the Psi Lake shimmered in colors that few believed belonged to him. His mother grew weaker. Some nights she could barely whisper, but she always asked, "Does the lake still sing?" And Eli always answered yes, though his chest felt hollow. Meanwhile, Victor Hale's reputation swelled. His seminar slides traveled quickly through departments. Graduate students quoted his innovation. Professors nodded with approval, and whispers of a paper soon to be published circled the halls. Each time Eli entered the lab, he felt the weight of betrayal pressing heavier. Reinhardt fought quietly on his behalf. He visited colleagues, reminded them of the night he had first seen the boy sketching waves on the steps. But academic corridors are long, and reputations walk faster than truth. "Without proof," one colleague told him. "How can you claim the idea belongs to a boy without even a school ID?" One evening, Eli found Reinhardt staring at the water tank, the projector off. The professor's shoulders slumped. "I've tried," he said, voice tired. "But Hale moves quickly. He has the language, the position. To many, you are invisible." "I don't want credit," Eli murmured. "I just want my mother to see the lake sing before—" He couldn't finish. Reinhardt turned sharply. "And she will. We will build it so that no theft can silence it." Together they worked late into the night. Eli painted phases into colors more vivid, added rhythm lines that pulsed like a heartbeat. The wall glowed with moving stained glass, and for a moment both teacher and student forgot the cold world outside. But even beauty could not shield Eli from reality. One snowy afternoon, the boarding house phone rang. He dropped his newspapers mid-route and pedaled to the hospital. Nurses met him with careful eyes. "Your mother is critical," one whispered. He rushed to her side. Her breath was shallow, her hands frail as paper. "Eli," she whispered, "promise me you'll keep listening to the waves, even when I am gone." Tears blurred his vision. "I promise, Mama. Every wave has a soul. You taught me that." Her lips curved faintly. "No, Eli. You taught me." Then her eyes closed, machine sighing as if the room itself exhaled. The world went still. Snow pressed harder against the window, and Eli's coat seemed heavier than his body. He buried his face into the fabric that still carried his father's scent. Reinhardt arrived minutes later, called by the hospital. He found Eli collapsed by the bed, notebook on the floor. The professor knelt, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You are not alone," he whispered. But Eli did not answer. In the days that followed, Cambridge blurred. The funeral was small, just a few neighbors, Reinhardt and Eli's quiet figure clutching his father's coat. No one from the university came. Victor Hale gave a lecture that same day, his name applauded while Eli lowered his mother into the frozen earth. Yet grief sharpened Eli's resolve. Back at the science center, he opened his notebook and wrote, "The lake will sing for her." He refused to let it fade into silence. Reinhardt supported him, though worry shadowed his face. "Grief is heavy," he told Eli, "but let it carve you into strength, not stone." Meanwhile, Victor prepared his paper for submission. Rumors spread it would reach a top journal within weeks. One night, Eli overheard graduate students discussing it. "Hale's visualization will change how we teach quantum mechanics. Imagine, every freshman could see the wave function." Eli slipped away unnoticed, but inside his chest burned a fire no snow could quench. That evening, Reinhardt found him working alone in the lab, projecting waves brighter than ever. "What drives you tonight?" he asked gently. Eli looked up, eyes rimmed red. "I need the lake to sing louder than his name, so loud that even in the valley where I was born, children will hear it. So loud that my mother, wherever she is, will hear it." The professor nodded, his own voice rough. "Then let us make it undeniable." Outside, bells rang across Cambridge. Inside, Ripples crossed in colored light, weaving patterns of grief, defiance, and hope. Eli stood by the tank, coat zipped, notebook open, ready to fight not for credit, but for memory. And far away, in an office lined with polished wood, Victor Hale smiled over the final draft of his paper. The title gleamed on the screen, his name alone beneath it. He clicked Submit, unaware that a boy in a torn coat had already vowed to make waves that would outlast him. March arrived with thawing snow, though Cambridge streets still glistened with ice. The Science Center stirred with a different chill, whispers of a major seminar. Victor Hale had arranged to present his paper officially, showcasing his breakthrough on visualizing quantum states. Invitations spread quickly. Professors from physics, mathematics, even computer science planned to attend. For many, it promised a triumph. Reinhardt saw the danger and acted. Quietly, he insisted that Eli's demonstration be included as a student contribution. After long arguments, the department agreed. "Let the boy show his toy," one professor muttered. Reinhardt clenched his fists, but accepted. It was all he could secure. Eli prepared with quiet fury. Nights in the lab turned to dawn as he refined the Psi Lake. He built sequences where waves interfered like choirs of color, nodes glowing as if alive. He coded rhythm lines that pulsed like heartbeats, timing them to match transitions between states. On the wall, the lake no longer looked like ripples in water. It looked like stained glass alive with breath. Still, fear gnawed at him. "Professor," he asked one night, "what if they only hear his voice? What if they don't see mine?" Reinhardt laid a hand on his shoulder. "Truth is not always loud, Eli. But even a whisper can cut through noise when it carries honesty." The day arrived. The lecture hall filled quickly, murmurs bouncing like echoes. Chandeliers glowed above polished wood, and the front rows glittered with faculty name tags. Eli sat near the back, clutching his notebook, father's coat zipped tight. Victor entered in a tailored suit, smiling as though the room already belonged to him. He began smoothly, "Today I will present a new approach for visualizing the quantum wave function. An approach that makes probability visible, intuitive, almost tangible." Slides appeared, bright diagrams, bands of color, familiar patterns. Gasps rose from the audience. Victor spoke of phase mapping and probability amplitude landscapes with practiced charm. Eli's hands shook. Every slide was a shadow of the lake he had birthed. Yet applause swelled with each conclusion. At last, Reinhardt stood. "Before questions," he announced, voice strong, "we have a contribution from a student. Eli Serrano will present his own demonstration." A ripple of surprise passed through the room. A boy? A newspaper carrier in a torn coat? Yet Reinhardt's authority held. Slowly, Eli rose, notebook clutched like armor. He walked to the front. The chandeliers seemed too bright, the eyes too sharp. Victor leaned back in his chair, smirking. "This should be charming," he whispered to a neighbor. Eli placed his notebook down, then turned to the audience. His voice trembled at first. I am not from Harvard. I deliver newspapers in the morning, but at night I come here, and I saw something in the equations, something like water." He switched on the projector. The tank lit up. Ripples spread, colored not just in bands, but in living hues that shifted with rhythm. On the wall, stained glass breathed. The audience stilled. "This," Eli said, steadier now, "is the wave function. Not as symbols on a board, but as movement and song. Where waves agree, light grows. Where they cancel, darkness stays. This is not only mathematics, it is music, visible." He adjusted controls. patterns blossomed, standing waves forming ladders of color, transitions flickering like heartbeats. My mother, Eli whispered, who never studied physics, once said it looked like a window breathing. If she could see it, anyone can. The universe does not hide. It sings. Silence stretched. Then, softly, a professor in the back said, "Beautiful." Another, "Clearer than anything we've taught." Murmurs rose, not for Victor, but for the boy in the coat. Victor's smile froze. He leaned forward sharply. "Charming," he said loudly, "but hardly rigorous. This is theater, not science." Reinhardt stepped in. "On the contrary, what you call theater is precisely the intuition your paper lacks, and we both know where you first saw these waves." Gasps fluttered. Victor flushed, anger creeping into his voice. "You accuse me of theft? This is outrageous!" Eli looked at him, trembling but firm. "I never wanted credit, only for the lake to sing honestly." He closed his notebook gently. "Even if you take my words, you cannot take its soul." The audience stirred uneasily. The seminar ended in tension. Applause scattered but real for Eli. That night, back in the lab, Reinhardt clasped Eli's hand. "You did more than defend yourself. You showed them truth. Remember this day." Eli nodded, though grief for his mother still shadowed his eyes. He whispered to the tank, "Mama, it sang for them. I hope you heard it." Outside, Cambridge bells rang. Inside, waves crossed in silent defiance. Victor Hale's paper might reach journals, but a boy in a torn coat had carved a mark on hearts that ink could not erase. Early spring thawed Cambridge, but the air in the science center stayed sharp. Eli kept working in the third-floor lab, though grief still weighed on his chest. His coat smelled faintly of pine and hospital antiseptic, a mixture of father and mother that never left. He whispered to the tank each night, "Sing louder, so she can still hear." Word of his seminar spread in unexpected ways. A few graduate students, struck by the colored waves, whispered that the boy's demonstration felt more honest than Victor Hale's polished slides. One professor quietly asked Reinhardt, "Who exactly is this Serrano boy?" For the first time, Eli's name appeared in conversations beyond pity. But Victor did not yield ground. His paper had already been accepted by a major journal. A notice appeared online. "Novel Visualization of Quantum States" by Victor Hale. Applause echoed through the department. To many, the matter was sealed. Reinhardt seethed. "He rushes to print, so truth cannot catch him." He paced the lab like a caged lion. Eli only bowed his head. "It doesn't matter," he murmured. "My mother's gone. She cannot see whose name is on the page." But it did matter. Reinhardt knew theft corroded the very soil of scholarship, and fate soon handed them a weapon. One evening, a graduate assistant named Marin approached Eli shyly. "I was at the seminar," she said. "The colors, the way the phase breathed, it was different from Hale's slides. His were stiff, like copies. Yours moved. Did you show him your notebook?" Eli nodded reluctantly. He asked questions. I answered. Marin bit her lip. "Then maybe you should know. His draft circulated last month, and in the margins I saw notes. Your handwriting, Eli. Equations in pencil, exactly like your notebook." Reinhardt stiffened. "Are you certain?" "Yes. He must have borrowed the notebook under the pretense of checking details, then copied." She hesitated. "I should not tell you this, but wrong is wrong." Proof. Fragile but real. Reinhardt's eyes hardened. then the facade will crack. The next department colloquium became a battlefield. Faculty gathered in a high-ceilinged hall, chalkboards wiped clean for the occasion. Victor stood confident, his paper newly published, his name buzzing with praise. Reinhardt rose deliberately. Colleagues, before we proceed, I must raise an issue. Hale's paper contains contributions not his own. The room stilled. Victor's smile faltered. Baseless slander, he snapped. Reinhardt's voice did not rise, but it cut like a blade. Witnesses saw Eli Serrano sketching these methods weeks before Hale's draft existed. And we now know his handwriting was copied into Hale's margins. This is not invention. This is theft. Gasps erupted. Victor flushed crimson. Absurd. You expect us to believe a child invented what I refined? Eli sat silent, coat pulled tight, notebook on his lap. Slowly, he stood. I never wanted war, he said softly. But my father taught me waves have souls, and my mother asked me to let them sing. I only wanted people to see. He opened the notebook, showing pages dated long before Hale's submission, sketches of colored bands, rhythm lines, careful notes in his small hand. Faculty leaned closer. Murmurs swelled. The dates match. Unmistakable handwriting. Victor's composure cracked. So what if the boy scribbled? Inspiration is not ownership. Science belongs to those who can carry it forward. Reinhardt's eyes blazed. No. Science belongs to truth, and truth demands honesty. The chair of the department intervened, voice grave. These are serious charges. We will convene a committee. Until then, Dr. Hale, you are suspended from representing the department in public forums. Victor's jaw tightened. He shot Eli a look of pure venom before storming from the hall. That night, the lab felt different. Eli traced his fingers over the tank's surface, watching ripples spread. I don't want to destroy him, he whispered. I just want the lake to live. Reinhardt placed a hand on his shoulder. Sometimes, Eli, protecting what is pure means facing what is corrupt. You did not choose this battle, but you will endure it. Eli nodded, though inside he felt only weariness. He thought of his mother's frail smile, of her words, "Let it sing for others." The lake glowed faintly in the projector's light, colors trembling like candle flames. Outside, the Charles thawed into restless water, carrying away sheets of ice. Inside, a boy in a torn coat prepared for storms heavier than snow, the storms of envy, pride, and the long fight for truth. By summer, Cambridge pulsed with green. The Charles shimmered with boats, and students lounged on the grass of Harvard Yard. But inside the Science Center, anticipation burned like fire. A public symposium had been announced, New Visions in Quantum Physics. Professors, students, visiting scholars, everyone would attend. For weeks, Reinhardt and Eli worked side by side. They rebuilt the Sci Lake demonstration, not just as a tank of water, but as a full projection, coded carefully into the old computers. Eli spent sleepless nights translating equations into colors and rhythms. He painted probability as glowing waves, phases as spirals of light, energy levels as ladders of music. This, Reinhardt said one evening, watching the projection bloom across the lab wall, will silence doubt. Not because they believe me, but because they cannot deny you. Yet doubt still gnawed at Eli. He wore his father's coat even in the summer heat, the fabric now threadbare, buttons barely holding. He whispered into the cloth, "Mama, will you hear me?" The day arrived. Sanders Theater filled until every seat was taken. Chandeliers glowed overhead, wood polished like mirrors. Eli sat trembling in the wings, notebook clutched to his chest. Reinhardt stood beside him, steady as stone. First came presentations by senior professors, heavy with equations and graphs. Applause was polite but distant. Then Reinhardt stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I present not a colleague, but a student. Eli Serrano." Murmurs rippled. A boy? A paperboy in a torn coat? Yet Eli walked onto the stage, every step echoing. He placed his notebook on the podium, looked at the sea of faces, and spoke. "I am not a Harvard student. I deliver newspapers. I cared for my mother until she passed. But at night, I sat on the steps of the Science Center and saw waves where others saw walls. My father once told me, 'Every wave has a soul.' Today, I will show you what he meant." He pressed the switch. The stage darkened. On the great screen behind him, colors unfolded, ripples spreading, meeting, canceling, glowing. The audience gasped. Patterns formed like stained glass alive, shifting with rhythm, beating like a heart. "This is psi," Eli continued, voice steady now. "Not as dry symbols, but as water and light. Where waves meet, they sing. Where they cancel, they rest. Probability is not mystery. It is music." He guided them through demonstrations, standing waves rising like ladders, transitions flashing in pulses of light, uncertainty shown not as confusion, but as gentle blur. Every image spoke with clarity no chalkboard ever carried. The hall was silent. Then applause broke, thunderous, rolling through the chamber. Eli's chest ached, not with fear but with release. He bowed his head, whispering inwardly, "Mama!" It sang for them. From the crowd, a voice rang out. "Whose idea was this?" It was the chair of the department, stern. Reinhardt rose. "His." From the first sketch on a cold night outside the Science Center. Eli opened his notebook, showing the pages. Dates long before Hale's paper, drawings of waves colored by hand. Faculty leaned forward, murmuring. Victor Hale, seated stiffly in the back, stood suddenly. "This is spectacle," he shouted. "Equations matter, not circus lights. Science is mine to refine." But the audience had seen enough. One professor rose. "Hale, the notebook predates your paper." Another added, "The originality lies here, not in your draft." The murmurs swelled into a tide. Hale's face flushed crimson. The chair spoke with finality. "Dr. Hale, your paper will be retracted pending investigation. Your conduct dishonors this institution." Gasps echoed. Victor staggered, then stormed from the hall, his footsteps drowned by applause that rose again, not for him, but for the boy in the coat. Eli stood frozen, the sound washing over him. He felt not triumph, but a quiet ache. He whispered under his breath, "I wish you were here, Mama." After the symposium, strangers approached him with congratulations. A professor from MIT, a visitor from Europe, even young students who said, "I saw the waves. I understood." Eli nodded politely, but his eyes searched the empty space where his mother might have sat. That night, Reinhardt walked him across the yard. "You have been vindicated, Eli. The world knows now." Eli hugged his coat. "But vindication doesn't bring her back." "No," Reinhardt said softly, "but it honors her. And perhaps that is the first step toward healing." They paused by the steps of the Science Center. Eli sat down where it all began. The night air was warm, but he zipped his coat anyway. He opened his notebook and wrote, "Truth does not shout, it waits. And when the time is right, it sings." Above them, the stars shimmered like distant ripples on water. For the first time, Eli felt the weight lift slightly. He imagined his mother smiling, his father's boots on scaffolding, and both their voices carried by the waves. The vindication was not the end. It was the threshold of another path, the path back to the valley where he was born, where children waited for a teacher who knew that even in the poorest soil, waves could still sing. The applause of Harvard faded, but the echo carried Eli farther than any bell tower. That summer, with Reinhardt's quiet blessing and a scholarship fund set aside by sympathetic faculty, Eli returned to California. The Imperial Valley stretched before him as he remembered. Fields brittle under the sun, wind tugging dust into the air, houses leaning against the weight of years. He rode through town on the same battered bicycle he had left behind years ago, his father's coat folded carefully in his satchel. Neighbors watched him pass, whispering, "That's Rosa's boy. He's back." The boarding house of Boston, the frozen steps of Cambridge, the chandeliers of Sanders Theater, all felt like another world. Yet Eli knew his journey wasn't ending here. It was flowering. His promise to his mother still rang in his ears. "Let it sing for others," he began simply. With Reinhardt's help, he shipped the old projector, the spare camera, and even blueprints of the Cy Lake setup to the valley. Local farmers offered a disused shed beside an irrigation canal. Eli swept the dust, patched the leaks, and set the tank on bricks. The walls were rough, the roof crooked, but when he lit the projector, colors spilled across the boards like stained glass. Children gathered, barefoot, eyes wide. They had never seen physics. Many had never seen a computer. Eli spoke gently. "This is water. This is light. And together, they show us something invisible." He tapped the tank, ripples spreading. The colors shifted. Waves crossing. The children gasped, laughing. One boy raised his hand. "Mr. Eli, is that magic?" Eli smiled softly. "No. It is the universe telling us it is alive. Every wave is a voice. If you listen, it will teach you." He told them about probability without mentioning equations. Sometimes the world doesn't tell us exactly where something is. It tells us where it might be. That is not weakness. That is respect. The children nodded, some whispering to one another, some leaning close to the tank. Word spread quickly. Parents began sending more children. The shed filled with eager eyes. Eli built simple lessons. How sound echoes like interference. How light splits into rainbows. How seeds in the desert wait for rare rain yet still know when to grow. Every lesson ended the same way, with the Lake of Cy singing on the wall. In quiet hours, Eli still grieved. At night he sat under the desert stars, his father's coat around his shoulders, notebook on his lap. He wrote, "Mama, they hear it now. Papa, I am building with water instead of bricks. I hope you see." The coat no longer felt heavy. It felt like a mantle, woven of loss and promise. Letters came from Cambridge. Reinhardt wrote in his sharp hand, "The department has retracted Hale's paper. He is gone. Your name is remembered here, but I know you are building something greater where you are." Eli wrote back, "Professor, I am building not for journals, but for children. You once told me curiosity can be fire. I am teaching them to hold it carefully. The valley now has sparks where there was only dust." Months passed. The shed turned into a schoolhouse. Farmers donated lumber. Neighbors painted walls. Eli hung sheets for screens, borrowed old laptops, and taught simple coding so children could make their own colors dance. They laughed when their ripples crossed, cheering as if they had discovered treasure. One evening, as the sun dipped red behind the fields, Eli stood at the doorway of the schoolhouse. Dozens of children sat inside, their faces lit by the projector's glow. For the first time, he felt peace wash over him. The lake was no longer his secret. It belonged to them. He closed his notebook and whispered,
Mama, Papa, it sings for everyone now.
The desert wind answered, carrying the sound of children's laughter across the dry fields. Years later, scholars would recall the boy in the torn coat who once stunned Harvard. But in the valley, he was simply Teacher Eli, the one who showed farm children that the universe sings in waves. His legacy was not a paper, nor a prize, but a chorus of young voices carrying knowledge like water through thirsty land. And in every ripple of that water tank, in every colored wave that danced against the wall, his parents' love still lived, carried forward by a boy who had once believed that every wave has a soul.